The ProSlide Tornado debuted in 2003 as a new concept for a half-pipe slide. The ride element consists of a large funnel-like structure where riders seated in rafts are flung up the sides of the funnel, oscillating back and forth inside before exiting into a runout. The reducing radius of the ride means that each swing is different and dynamic. This, combined with the forceful ride experience these rides became known for, led to them exploding in popularity in the early 2000s. Even today, they're an iconic part of any major water park with over 97 installations worldwide. But in recent years, more and more of these rides have been being removed, and one major reason is for injuries. While injuries on water rides are somewhat common compared to those on dry rides simply due to the dynamics of these rides themselves, these slides in particular have seen a higher than average number of injuries. Most of these have to do with ride forces causing riders to be thrown from their raft and causing them to make contact with the slide deck, or with riders simply being injured by the ride's forces themselves. Today we'll investigate these injuries in a few different ways to understand why these slides have seen more injuries than others, as well as if you should be concerned. First, let's take a look at some numbers. Safer Parks was an industry organization that collected data on ride injuries starting in the early 2000s and ending in 2017. During their time operating, they collected data on nearly every US ride injury that required a visit to a hospital. In this time frame, they recorded 40 injuries on these slides. For a point of comparison, ProSlide's Cannonball slide model, which debuted 2 years prior to the tornado in 2001, only reported 23 injuries in that same time frame. While this is not a groundbreaking number of injuries on either attraction, especially considering that these are participatory attractions and rider behavior plays a large role in their safety, there is a measurable difference in the inherent risk posed by a tornado slide compared to others. The design of these slides mean that overspeed rafts run the risk of hitting portions of the slide with more speed than designed, resulting in parts of the raft overturning or riders being thrown from the raft or into the air. It should be noted that there are many versions of the ProSlide Tornado, and these risks are really only present in the large 60-foot diameter rides. In addition, ProSlide's new versions of this same ride feature a new profile for the funnel that should eliminate the risks present on the original models. With the statistics of injuries on these slides uncovered, let's now look at a few case studies of injuries on tornado slides. The first report comes from July 14, 2004, on Tornado located at Six Flags Hurricane Harbor, LA. On that day, the tornado slide was operating normally. A fully loaded raft was sent down the slide. The raft was jostled significantly due to improper flow from the funnel wetting nozzles located at the upper edges of the funnel. After the ride was over, one rider complained of head and neck pain and was eventually sent to the hospital. This resulted in the ride being shut down and the state of California being called in to inspect the ride. The state investigators arrived on scene and soon began testing the ride and comparing their test results to the results they had received when the ride was first certified for operation, as well as with the guidelines stipulated by ProSlide. The investigators would find that several aspects of the ride were not being operated in the same manner as when the ride was certified for operation. In addition, there were inconsistencies between the operator's manual developed by the park and used for operator training, and the owner's manual provided to the park by ProSlide. The most noticeable inconsistency had to do with the flow rates on the ride's several water flow valves. This included in the loading pool, the wake nozzles near the exit of the flume, and the wetting nozzles located at the top of the funnel. Improper flow on these nozzles had contributed to the injury on the 14th. They mandated the park bring these nozzles back in spec with manufacturer guidelines, as well as implement a way of monitoring the flow in real time to prevent the slide from operating with improper flow. These changes would go on to be implemented and the slide would re-enter operation later that year. It's not clear from the report if this injury was caused by a lack of flow or by too much flow, but too little flow would likely result in rafts having too much friction and as a result causing them to jolt or bounce. And too much flow would likely cause the stream of water at the center of the funnel to be too large of a braking force, and thus cause riders to be thrown from the raft. Accordingly, both are possible causes of this injury. Let's now look at another example of some more common injuries on this slide type over a longer period of time. Next, we'll be looking at the tornado slide located at Six Flags Great Adventure, more specifically Hurricane Harbor, New Jersey. The first incident on this slide comes from July 19, 2010. On this day, around 3 p.m., the slide was operating normally. As a fully loaded raft came down the slide and entered the funnel, it slid high and fast up the walls of the funnel. Near the end of the funnel, the raft was still rocking, and this caused it to slide up high near the exit of the funnel right next to the wake nozzles. This caused one rider to strike the slide, resulting in an injury to one of the rider's head and shoulders. As a result of this accident, the slide had its maximum number of riders temporarily reduced to 2. This would later be increased back to 4, and it may have had a stricter maximum weight limit added, though this is not clear. On August 31, 2010, the slide had returned to 4-person operation. Around 1:30 p.m., it was operating normally with 4 riders being loaded into a raft. 2 of these riders were children and 2 were adults. All were properly seated and the raft was sent down the slide. Near the end of the funnel section, one of the adult riders reported feeling like the slide hit a bump, likely caused by the water at the base of the funnel and being thrown out of the raft. They then completed the slide outside of the raft while still holding on to the raft. In the run-out pool, they reported that they had shoulder pain and had possibly broken their collarbone to a lifeguard. The slide was shut down and state investigators would determine that there was nothing wrong with the ride or the way that it was being operated. The ride would be allowed to reopen and the injured rider would make a full recovery. On June 27, 2011, a rider exited the tornado with their head down in the raft. When attended to by lifeguards, they reported that they had serious pain in their neck. A full inspection of the ride found no issues and the injury was ruled to be the result of a pre-existing condition. The next injury with a clear cause on the slide occurred on May 27, 2019, which goes to show just how uncommon these injuries actually are in the big picture of things. On that date, a rider fell out of their raft while in the funnel. They hit their head and back, resulting in a neck and back pain. On September 6, 2020, an injury was reported on the tornado. In this case, a rider reported bumping their head on part of the slide, resulting in neck pain. The state of New Jersey once again completed a full inspection of the ride and said, quote, "Nothing wrong with the ride, good operation," and, quote, "Patron bumped head, said neck hurt, likely just during normal operation," end quote. 2 minor incidents occurred in 2021. The first happened on June 13th when a rider was popped up out of the raft and jolted their neck as they tried to hold on. The next happened on August 2nd when a rider claimed to have struck their head at one point during the ride. The most recent accident on this slide occurred on September 6, 2021. The slide was operating normally when 3 riders were loaded properly into a raft and sent down the slide. At some point during the slide, one of the 3 riders decided to jump out of the raft. This destabilized the raft for the remaining 2 riders, resulting in one of these riders hitting their head and back against the slide deck. This incident would be ruled out as rider error, but for some reason it still attracted a flurry of media attention to this slide and to all tornado slides as a result, eventually resulting in the creation of this video. As we have discussed so far, these slides have a slightly higher risk of injury compared to other water slides, but that risk is still quite small. Water slides in general have a higher risk than other rides as they are participatory attractions, meaning that each rider has control over their own ride to some extent. In addition, the randomness of a water ride presents some risk that cannot be removed. As a result, focusing on these injuries, especially those that do not result in permanent injury, is not very productive. There are simply some risks that will always be present on these attractions, and riders on these rides and all water slides should know these risks and be willing to accept them. That being said, I hope you've learned something from this video about injuries on water slides and on tornado slides. Tornado slides continue to give millions of safe rides every year at parks all around the world. In fact, the ride model is still very much in production today. ProSlide, for their part, has modified the design of the Tornado 60 to have a slightly shallower entrance to the bowl. This redesign likely eliminates the slightly higher risk these rides present, making the slide just as injury prone as any other water slide. What are your thoughts on these slides? Do you think they should be removed for being too risky, or are they just like any other slide? As always, reports used to create this video can be found in the video description, along with all other accident reports I have used to create past videos. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.